We flew out of Dublin on Tuesday afternoon at about 5 o'clock, arrived in Istanbul on Tuesday evening, shortly after 9 o'clock Irish time, 11 o'clock local time, and then our connecting flight to Hatay province to the west of Syria, so on the Turkish-Syrian border, was at about 5:30 in the morning. So we stayed around in the airport and then we boarded our flight to Hatay, arrived there at about 7:30. Then once we had breakfast, it was straight off to try and get into Syria. So the human appeal team, there were I think seven or eight of us, and we went to the Human Appeal International Ireland offices, which were very close to the Syrian border, a stone's throw from the Syrian border. And we waited there to get approval to cross into Syria, because it's a very complicated process for anyone, not just aid workers, for anyone to actually cross the border. Because on the Turkish side, it's controlled by Turkish soldiers, and in many cases it's on the whim of them whether or not you do get across. They don't care if you're going to meet someone in the camps, if you know somebody there, people living in the camps who've been away or travelling back, or indeed humanitarian workers, who I was one of the humanitarian group of Human Appeal yesterday. So Human Appeal checked with their people on the ground. They have contacts with local charitable organisations who know people on the borders, who know the people who are in charge of getting people from one side to the other, and we spoke with them, and we had to wait. We were at the Human Appeal offices before 10 o'clock in the morning, but it was about 12 o'clock before we got our approval to hopefully get across the border. We headed towards one of the border crossings, the initial border crossing. Just to show you how complicated the situation was, we wanted to cross Bab al-Hawa, but we could not do so because the Turkish authorities who controlled that border crossing told us that they did not want more than 2 people from the same nationality crossing. Then after waiting about 2 hours, we were finally waved on into Syria, and that's when the journey began. That's when things changed. And from then we travelled to Bab al-Hawa Hospital. That's a field hospital just over on the Syrian side of the border that is helping to care for and treat those directly affected by the conflicts. We spoke with one of the organisers in the hospital, who told us that over 80% of the patients are children, and they're trying to treat as many of those children as they can. And they're obviously inundated because there's conflict going on all the time, every day. And that hospital is no more than about 30 kilometres from the front line where the main action is taking place.
We have 2 guys inside them, it's from an direct.
And even when we were there, a number of ambulances arrived with casualties. The reason we went to that hospital, because it's one of the ones that Human Appeal has been quite helpful in raising funds for, and also managing to secure donations of equipment. The organiser was very excited. He showed us around the hospital and showed us the new CAT scan machine, which is ridiculously expensive when you consider where it is, and the hospital would not have been able to afford it normally. But that has been, they managed to actually incorporate it into the hospital. They use it on a daily basis, and the organiser was very excited when he showed me how beneficial it's been and how it's helped them to improve the treatment of patients within there. We got a tour of the entire complex. He showed us the various treatment rooms, how people were being treated, also some of the problems they're having as well. They're quite limited on space and expertise. They have a number of doctors and a number of specialists, but they don't have enough in that they have continuous influx of patients, and that's only getting bigger. That's not getting any smaller. So that's something they have to deal with as well. I also spoke with a doctor who's volunteering in the hospital. He's over from a hospital in Manchester for a couple of weeks, and he is a surgeon, and he was treating some of the patients there. I spoke to him about his experiences, and he explained to me how difficult it is for them because they're constantly working. They always have something to do. There's no break, there's no let up. And the specialty he has is not possessed by anyone else in the hospital at the moment. And he is only able to give 2 weeks of his time. He has to go tomorrow, and after that then there's the difficulty of people still needing to be treated, and do they have the expertise to do it. So he's been trying to show local doctors and people in the hospital how to do what he's doing, to share his expertise, so hopefully they can continue his work when he's gone. So that was a very interesting experience. Then we were told we had to leave quite quickly. In order to make sure we made it back to Turkey before the border closes. They close the borders every day at around 5 o'clock. But again, as I explained, there's no consistency with regard to border control. So that could end up being a half hour earlier, a half hour later. So we couldn't take any chance there. And again, you were driving through the refugee camps on the way back. We didn't stop at Hatma camp. We weren't in a position to, we were in a rush to get back. But even then you could see new camps that have just sprung up. So people living in tents that they've only moved in the last few weeks. But the big thing to note is that things are only going to get worse. There are more and more displaced people by the day. There are more and more refugees having to flee their homes, having to find accommodation somewhere else. And they're coming to camps such as this, which are already bulging. They're already at their limit. So that's where the need for aid becomes ever more present, ever more important. And not only to be able to donate and gather donations, but also to be able to distribute it efficiently so that the people who need it most are getting it. And part of the problem is through a combination of mismanagement along the border, of lack of communication, lack of coordination, that it's very hard to actually get the aid to the people who need it in appropriate timing. So that's where we are at the moment. Today I've been told it's not, for security reasons, we're not going to be able to cross into Syria, but we're going to have to try and gather other people's stories and try and find out a little more context and background to what's happening and why it's happening, so we can gather a better understanding ourselves and then hopefully share that in other areas as well. So behind me here with the Human Appeal International team, we've just been to a rehabilitation and treatment centre here in Reyhanli that deals with victims of the conflict in Syria, men, women and children, and they're helping to rehabilitate them following horrific injuries as a result of the conflict in Syria. For example, a large majority of the patients in here have been paralysed either through the result of being shot by soldiers, or maybe they have also been caught up in a shelling or a bombing attack. So they would deal with maybe about 50 to 60 patients in here on a daily basis. They'd have new patients coming in all the time as well, and they help to treat them as best they can. All of the patients are from Syria, all of the staff are also from Syria, and they help through donations from an amalgamation of international aid organisations to treat them as best they can. So they also have 4 full-time physiotherapists who help to deal with the injured people on a daily basis. They help to try and improve their situation, and in many cases they've seen improvements. From talking to the organisers here in the centre, they've also said that they have new patients coming in all the time, and the funding hasn't increased, so they're being put under more and more pressure every day. You can see some of the patients from the centre there beside us. They're going out for a daily walk. What is interesting also from the Irish perspective is that a lot of the donations from Ireland have directly impacted the lives of people here. One of the human aid workers here was telling us that they've had hospital beds from Castlebar that are in use here in this treatment centre, anything from other medical equipment from wheelchair to crutches. So it's a really fantastic effort, and that this centre even exists, but the fact that they're managing to do the work they can under increased pressure is even more impressive.